Lincoln stared out of the window of the van as Lynn Sr. drove him to Dr. Lopez's office. The parents had already took the liberty of informing his teachers that Lincoln would be absent due to a necessary doctor appointment. Rita wished that she could go with them, but Dr. Frankenstein had to come down with major dental appointments lined up today, and the lab March was going to be needed to help administrator some root canal procedures and to help replace teeth. Speaking of teeth, Rita also made sure to have her boss take a look at Lincoln to make sure her son's teeth won't come back crooked due to their forced removal. Of course, Lynn glanced at his son, noting the posture and the uncertainty he gave to his passing scenery. Nervous, sport? Just a little. Don't worry, Dr. Lopez is a nice lady, and it's not like she's gonna hurt you. Lincoln shook his head. It's not that I'm worried about Dr. Lopez. He turned to his dad. Clyde talks about her enough that I know she sounds cool, but I'm not sure if I could trust whatever she might say since she had talks with. He bit his lip. Them. Lynn sighed awkwardly. Of course, Lincoln would have his issues on trusting another word, if they interacted with his sisters. As far as he knew, Lincoln only trusted his parents, closest friends, and Lily. Well, have you ever thought of giving her an open book? I mean, she's the professional after all. The boy stared at the floor. That's what she said I should do, even though it's hard. Lincoln glanced back at the window. I honestly don't know what to think right now. I'm just freezed up whatever. I see them. Besides Lily, yet Luann actually helped me the other day. The news was the paradox. What'd she do? She saved me from getting my back crushed by a stampede. When I realized who she was, I thought she was going to do anything to hurt me. But she just stood there and did nothing. Lincoln put a hand to his head. I was just imagining things? Or is there something I'm not just getting? Lynn wanted to tell his son that he was overthinking a bit, but his fear towards his sisters was just something in his mind that wasn't real. But the realm of the human mind wasn't something he understood. Even if he gave his own opinion, would Lincoln actually take the advice to heart? After all, it was just how that Lincoln was beginning to question his own fears. After getting forced interaction, no less, the parents told the girls to keep themselves scarce from him. But this might not only heighten the boy's anxiety, given how the nightmare he had in middle school had broke him down when Lola revealed Lincoln might hurt her. Well, that's just why you're seeing a therapist soon. I honestly don't know what I could tell you, 'cause I'm not even sure if our solutions are in the right way. You would have talked with her on the phone before, so speaking in person shouldn't be that hard. Just tell her what's on your mind and she'll offer you some kind of advice. The white-haired child nodded, leaned against the door. As many times as Clyde visited Dr. Lopez, he sincerely hoped she can give some really good advice. Miranda sipped on her coffee as she stared out the open window. It was a nice day outside, a warm 75 degrees, and it was since it wasn't exactly cold in the building. She didn't wear her scarf or her coat. Today she was anticipating the arrival of the loud child whose fears were the center of the concern for the family. The doctor looked over her notes as she took with the other louds a few times prior to build a picture of what Lincoln might be like. As with most kids, he'll probably be nervous, a little timid, and hesitant to recall the incident that had brought him here in the first place. Not to mention, given their little phone session, his insecurities was about his position in the family. Well, today's going to be fun, Miranda half joked to herself. Clyde often spoke about how Lincoln was like a brother he had never had, but that would mean a number of things. Either way, a lot of similarities were literal minor images of each other. The Hispanic woman sincerely hoped it was for the former, one that Clyde was annoying enough. A knock at the door half startled her. Miranda shriveled her head just as the white-haired boy peeked inside. The doctor blinked in surprise. The Louds weren't kidding about Lincoln's hair color. Hi. I'm guessing you're Dr. Lopez? That I am. She hopefully fully turned around. You must be Lincoln. Your family said a lot about you during their talks. Yeah, Lincoln let himself in and shut the door. I guess they did. He studied the doctor for a moment. Wow, Clyde was nearly on spot when he mimicked your appearance weeks ago. Miranda raised an eyebrow. How so? He wore everything that you have right now, including the scarf and jacket. The boy gave a frown and gazed at the floor. Now I wish I could have stayed at his house that whole weekend. Not sure if I should be surprised or aghast, the therapist said to herself. All right, Lincoln, take a seat here. She pointed at the lounge chair, and we'll get you started. The boy nodded before heading to his spot to lie down. Miranda stole a glance at his cast, feeling a bit of pity for the young man. He didn't know how long this talk of theirs would take, or even it would do him any good. His parents said Clyde even played up a good doctor, as if it was some miracle worker. Miranda sure didn't seem to fit that part, just that of the regular middle-aged person with a job telling people what certain thoughts mean and giving good advice. There was also the fact that Clyde's frequent visits, and that Lincoln was still uncertain about Miranda talking to his sisters. That just made him have his doubts. Lincoln took a deep breath before exhaling. Keep an open mind, Lincoln, like Dad said. Miranda set her coffee on the desk before finishing up the notebook and out of her desk drawer. She made her way over to the chair sitting cross-legged from Lincoln. So, Lincoln, how have you been since you got out of the hospital? Lincoln pursed his lips. If you want an honest answer, not so great. I suppose it has to do with your nightmares. The boy nodded. I thought that maybe after I got out of the hospital they would go away. He glanced at his left arm. I guess it wasn't as simple as that. Miranda hummed as she wrote something down. Do you feel that they've gotten even worse or felt the same? In some ways worse. I mean, though my dream last night was kinda weird. Care to explain? Lincoln stared down at the ceiling. So, a couple of days ago, I had a horrible nightmare which my sisters were sharks, and a chill went down his spine. They ate me. And then I had another one that wasn't as bad, but the words started to die in his throat. Just give me a second. The lad took a few deep breaths. I had another in school where I was alone and they dragged me in the shadows. Then last night I had a dream where I was a savvy and my sisters were all superheroes. That does sound rather odd from the patterns you described. Do you know anything that you might have inspired that change? Lincoln's cheeks reddened a little. I fell asleep while reading A Savvy. Ah, so what happened in this dream? Myself and Lily were looking around for crimes in the city, while my other sisters were following lead on the villain named Card Shark. I know Lily's a baby, but in my dream she was about 7 years old, and when we got a distress call from my sisters, they said they needed help despite the fact they were kinda upset at me on how we failed to bring justice to a couple of villains. Lincoln gave a sad, half-lidded stare at the floor. Turns out it was a trap and the girls beat me to the ground. It felt worse than the version of what happened to me a few weeks ago. I see, the doctor noted. Did it end there the same as your other dreams? The boy shook his head. Surprisingly, it didn't. I passed out, and before it could go any further, Clyde woke me up. He scratched the area where his cowlick was. I think it might have been due to the weird debate I'm having in my head. Miranda had a feeling on what it was about, but she had to make sure. Hopefully, it wasn't anything negative. Was there some kind of reaction that sparked in this conflict with yourself? The 11-year-old glanced out the window. Luann helped me after I almost had my back crushed by a group of students. I don't get why, though. I find none of them would really care and prefer to see me hurt. Maybe it's just Luann or something else, but I'm not sure. So he hasn't gone too far gone then. Guess this won't be as difficult as I imagined. Miranda wrote down the thought before shifting her position a little. Now, Lincoln, I'm going to ask you a couple of things about your personal life. In some which I already know during your phone sessions, but I just want to be sure if anything changed since then. Now, everything we talked about here can be kept between us. Or if you feel you need to, make this information however you see to fit it. I haven't told your family about what your nightmares entailed were in the way. Okay, I guess. Lincoln replied as he sat up, his legs hanging over to the side of his seat. Now, before all this happened, how would you describe your life at home? Can you talk about your hobbies, your family, and activities you tend to do? I'm just trying to build a picture here. Lincoln gave a low sigh as he searched his memories of how home was before the whole sister fight protocol scenario came up. Contrary to what most may think, despite being heavily traumatized from the beating he received, some happy memories still resided in his brain, buried under a large pile of past nightmares of his ever-growing anxiety. It took Lincoln a few minutes to dig them up, as such memories were becoming a bit scarce. Before all this happened, I guess I could say that being at home was normal? Normal as it could be for a large family. That is, most days I would go to school, hang out with Clyde or my friends, read a savvy, play video games. If I was at home, Lincoln paused, and spent a lot of time helping my sisters. Do you have any sort of passion hobby that you usually did? The 11-year-old pursed his lips again. If I had to be honest, I think helping my sisters was my passion. They always came to me for advice or help, and if they needed anything, well, my younger sisters usually, but sometimes the older ones did too. Lincoln began counting on his fingers. Lori on the first off chances wants my opinion on something, or at least wants me to do me a favor for her. Lenny wants me to model for her. Luann always wants to test her jokes on me. Lisa always needs an assistant for weird experiments. I'd sometimes jam with Luna when she makes a new song too. He took a short pause. Then there's Lynn, who always wants me as her sports partner or training dummy in some class. Lola and Lana want me for their tea parties and or to watch their pets. Lucy always comes to me for a poem advice. And lastly, Lily either wants to be changed or play around. Miranda looked at the list that she complied when she asked the girls of what Lincoln usually helped with them. Noting how much they matched up, for someone with 10 sisters, I'm surprised you managed to help find the time for all of them. Well, it's more complicated than that. Sometimes I do try my best to be there for them, while there are other times they just drag me into their stuff without asking me first. Has this happened interfered with you something you wanted to do? The 11-year-old nodded. More than once. I even tried ignoring them one day when I just want some peace and quiet. He gave a small frown. Let's just say it's something I'll never do again. Interesting, the doctor stated. But in general, how is your relationship with your siblings? Positive? Part of Lincoln wanted to say he did, while another half was saying the opposite. He did have some fun memories with his sisters, but he also had some bad moments were almost as equal as good ones. Recent events that also seemed to be those pleasant memories carry less weight than they normally would have. A few times he had opened his mouth as if it were to speak, only for the words to dissolve into nothing but air. Seeing him hesitating, Miranda continued, Lincoln, given what we talked about during our last chat, how do you view yourself in regardless of your family? Lincoln gripped the side of his chair and he felt another wave of depression hit him. I feel like I was probably some mistake. What brings out this feeling in you? All of my sisters have some special talent that makes them stand out, while I just sit in the back to cheer them on. He blinked, letting a stray tear run free. All of them. And yes, even Lily has won some award in one way or another. Anytime I've tried it, it hasn't worked. The only time I've been close to getting one was I had to give it up because I had embarrassed my sisters to get to it. And sure, they gave me a cardboard trophy for most improved brother. But I actually did get better after that. Lincoln took a deep breath through his nose. Can't say I did. Miranda tapped her pen against the paper and notebook, and it seems that Luna was dead on about her assumption. She circled the statement. But just a minute ago you said that your hobby was helping your sisters. Did you feel as if losing something important to you? Lincoln nodded. To me it feels like the sisters have finally got to some point where they don't need me anymore. I don't solve all their fights, but I believed it was the only thing I was good at. Just being there for my sisters. Lincoln then pulled his legs up and sat cross-legged on the chair. That's the part of the reason why I wanted to get involved. They keep telling me I wouldn't understand and that it was, He quoted his fingers, "sister thing," but I don't see what was so hard about solving a little issue around a dress. Similar case to Lori's issue, the psychologist wrote down. Lincoln folded his arms, gripping the shoulder in that fateful Sunday that came to view in his mind. But if I knew what was going to happen when I did get involved, I wouldn't have done anything. Flipping over a couple pages, Miranda found the notes that she made when Lincoln talked with her a week ago. She skimmed through the part where she talked about his nightmares. She glanced back up at Lincoln, who was rocking back and forth in the seat. "Do you still believe your sisters are still out to get you? Or has your viewpoint on them changed?" I still do think they're trying to get me, but I'm just unsure why they haven't done anything yet." "Okay." Miranda closed her book. "Now this is going to be a little bit of trending something through rough territory. So please bear with me on this, Lincoln. During the scuffle with your sisters, did something happen during the fight that made you believe your sisters were trying to kill you?" Lincoln's eyes began to fill with tears, his lip quivering and sobs built up in his throat. His breaths were a little uneven, each little stifle he took reaching upon the corner of the room. The boy shut his eyes as he silently cried to himself, his hand moving up to grab a wad of white hair. Each time he thought about the fight, nothing really dread or anguish that filled every part of his being. The 11-year-old couldn't recall anything important that happened during the brawl. He only could hardly see with all the arms, hands, and feet flying everywhere. Even if he opened his eyes for the second, the only thing he would ever see was just a fist filled with hate mere inches from it. Probably the one saving grace from the fight was the girls too busy kicking his ass to berate him even further. All I knew was pain. Lincoln's voice was a low whisper. Just pain." Miranda glanced off to the side before setting her book on the nearby table, getting out of her seat. Just as she did with Lisa, the doctor sat next to the sniveling boy and put a comforting arm around him. Lincoln flinched from the sudden contact, but instinctively leaned onto her, as if Dr. Lopez was his own mother. If one of them managed to reach around my neck, they would have killed me and not realized it. Lincoln rubbed his nose, taking a moment to glance at his snot before wiping on his shirt. Those few minutes, hours, I don't know, but it reminded me of how much of a screw-up I was for the family. He moved his hand down to the seat, noticing he had pulled a few strands of hair off. "My first nightmare involved me being back at the house, and my sisters were all demons about to finish what they started, and over that first week alone, just kept getting worse." "In retrospect, what's the worst nightmare you've ever had?" Lincoln stared at the floor. "I would say it was the one where I had the same day we talked. It was about the time I humiliated in front of my sisters, just to try to win a video contest, except they all tried to kill me for embarrassing them. I managed to evade them for a while, but at the end, Lisa turned one of my toys into a killer robot and ate me." He stayed silent for that moment. That one that was alone was bad, but the worst that happened a couple days ago, into my stay in the hospital. Miranda had raised an eyebrow as she grabbed a tissue box. She took a few out and held Lincoln's nose. The boy blew into it, clearing out the agitated sinuses. The doctor balled the wad of tissues and folded and threw it into the waste bin. "One night I've been wondering, what if I was more like my sisters? Maybe we wouldn't have such a fight if I was a girl. At least that's what I originally thought." Cold sensation went through Lincoln's body as he vividly recalled the horrible, terrible dream. Lisa had heard that I wanted to be turned into a girl, and our sisters agreed to help her. I thought she had some sort of weird ray gun or something that could easily change me. But what she had in mind was much, much worse. The boy paused to gather his thoughts. She strapped me in some table, and she and the girls operated on me. Did they cut my wiener and have those round things under it? And then they forcibly cut a large hole where it used to be and stuck something inside. It's just too much. Lincoln bit his lip, blinking away from small tears. The worst part of it was I could feel everything they did to me. By the end of it, Lisa claimed her operation was successful, even though I was dead too from losing too much blood. I was lucky to have a tube attached because I think I could have wet myself otherwise. To say Miranda was vividly shocked about what would be an understatement. Her mind was still debating on whatever or not she heard was true, as well as wondering what the other sick nightmares that Lincoln experienced since he first came to his fear of his siblings. Realizing that she was staring off into space, the doctor brought herself back to reality. Do you get nightmares like that every night? Lincoln shook his head. It's not every night. Probably a couple days ago before I get another one. In those dreams of yours, Miranda temporarily removed her glasses to clean them. Do you think your siblings are actually capable of doing such things? I believe they are in some cases. I mean, I guess it's kind of crazy that Lisa would turn my sisters into sharks or even mess with Bun Bun without my parents' permission. But that hasn't stopped her from doing crazy experiments before. Lincoln grabbed another tissue to clean his nose. A sloppy, wet sound was produced as he emptied more snot into the cotton cloth. He then stopped crying, and his eyes became red and puffy. I'm very nervous at school because 5 of my sisters go there, but they haven't done anything, even though I had a nightmare where they caught me by myself. So are you starting to see the difference between the reality and dreamscape? In all honesty, Lincoln still believed what happened in his dream could become a real thing if it wasn't careful. Yet there had been a few times in the past where he lets his imagination get the best of him and made him miss out on some fun times. In this case, he's taken a toll on his sleep schedule. Miranda shifted a bit so there was a small space between them. You see, Lincoln, what you're experiencing in your dreams is, and what you see in real life is two different aspects. The sisters in you see in your dreams are based off your fears of being near them, and they're reminding you of what they can do if you upset them. And from what I can gather as to why you think they want to end you, part of that stems from your insecurities and about the place in your family. You feel though they might be better off without you, yet they want you to prove that you can be in some use. You telling me that you felt like losing your place in the family as the meditator was a good example of that. As for a part, do you think your sisters were tadly over aggressive? Sometimes. Lincoln looked towards his therapist. Lola, Lynn, and even Luna on a few occasions can prove that. I would say it takes them a lot to upset them. I just think I ended up pushing the wrong buttons. I see. Now let me ask you another question, Lincoln. Do you know what it means to be blinded by emotion? The loud boy pierced his lips and scratched an itch behind his ear. I believe I know it has something to do with not seeing clearly. Well, you're very close. Miranda leaned back on the chair. When one is blinded by their emotions, it can cause them to act irrationally and to things in a certain way that may or may not be true. I'm not saying your fears towards your sisters was irrational, but it seems essentially creating a tunnel that can lead you to only one aspect of you and stick with it. So you're saying that I can't see the whole picture? Yes. Considering how little that he's seen his sisters and Luann's reaction when they met in the hallway, there was definitely something going on that Lincoln wasn't seeing. Thinking all the way back from when he smacked Lynn with his food tray, she ran out of the room crying instead of attacking him. Just before he passed out after seeing all of his sisters gather in the hospital room, he could have sworn he heard the familiar sounds of his sisters crying. Lincoln glanced at his arm. Most of his injuries had healed except that one. Understandably, it's a large limb, and it was literally broken. But Lim claimed responsibility and apologized for it. How can I see what's really going on with my sisters? Simplest advice I can give you is to keep an open mind. Fear can both be rational and irrational. You be afraid of rattlesnakes or black widow because their venom can cause harm to you. You can even be afraid of someone if they're holding a knife to you. Well, unless you're Chuck Norris, Jason Statham, Jackie Chan, Bruce Lee, or Dwayne Johnson. Lincoln gave a small, confused look at Miranda, making her cheeks flush red. Sorry, I was getting off topic. But at the same time, you might be afraid of a different snake, even though it's completely harmless. The same could apply to a human being. and who you know has a tough exterior, but usually a very nice and a which is possibly based on the past experience. However, that is still up to you to decide. Lincoln blinked before shifting his gaze to a wall opposite of him. I guess that's it. Dad told me just to keep an open mind when it came to speaking with you, and he was right. I didn't really need to take your advice earlier. He looked back towards Miranda, but I will now. The Hispanic woman got off the chair, heading for the desk. This probably wasn't as my place to tell you, but your sisters do care about you, Lincoln. They want nothing more than to you to return to your normal self, and they are even trying to fix problems they didn't know they had or were aware but didn't know how. If that's true, how am I supposed to talk with them if I keep freezing up whenever I see, or hear them? The doctor gave a short laugh. We're in the 21st century, Lincoln. There are many ways to reach out to someone. True, Lincoln got out of his chair. I guess I have a really lot to think about it. But I thank you so much, Miss Lopez. I can see why Clyde visits you frequently. In my opinion, you're so much better patient than Clyde. No offense to him. But do let me know if you wish to talk again. Lincoln nodded before he walked out of his office. Many thoughts ran through his mind like a bullet train. That talk was a little more insightful than he intentionally let on, and the Loud felt that he probably wouldn't be needed to the last time to speak to Miss Lopez. His sisters, his fears, his own securities. There was a lot to take in, and starting to form a small migraine. As soon as he reached the lobby, Lynn Sr. nearly jumped out of his seat. The father noticed that Lincoln's eyes were a bit red, no doubt from shedding a couple of tears. How did it go? It was interesting. Lincoln's eyes were closed as he dozed off in the car. He figured it might be a good idea to sleep, since he had piled up. Plus, he had already feeling drowsy as he breathed steadily. He started to feel as if something was pressed against his chest. The feeling of got tighter to the point where he started coughing. Open his eyes, Lincoln had already found himself staring at the ceiling of what appeared to be a large cave. Great, he couldn't even tell what time it was. He had tried to stand up, but immediately fought against the idea as it hurt to move. Glancing down at his body, the white-haired boy saw bandages strapped around his chest along with a full cast on his arm. To the right was a big bag of blood that was suspended by a utility pole. Blood flowed from the bag into his side. Lincoln wondered what on earth happened, and what caused him to be such in a bad state. That's when he realized it. His Ace Savvy uniform was folded up into a chair not far away. Next to the chair sat a tube with rocket launcher with a purple camouflage hat and combat boots laying next to it. The events of the last few hours came to him like a train helped through a semi. His teammates lured him into a trap and beat him near to death. Then Deuce came and saved him. But where was she? And how did she manage to get help? A farting sound cut through the room. Lincoln looked past his cast arm to see it assumed was from the bathroom. The small, feminine, childish grunts came from behind the door. Another loud fart sounded, and it also sounded like it came from it. Ah, poo-poo. Came a voice Lincoln realized all too well. A toilet flushed soon, and Lily pushed open the door. She quickly shut it to prevent the smell from getting out. Don't go in there for a while, she giggled to herself. Her sight then focused on Lincoln, and to her surprise, their gazes met. Lincoln! Lily gasped, before quickly running to her brother's side. Are you okay? Does everything hurt? How many fingers I'm holding up? Lily, what's your temperature? Does your arm hurt? Need me to fluff your pillow? The older Loud did his best to avoid rolling his eyes whenever someone on the team was injured in a fight. Lenny and Lily would play nurse until the person in question was returned back to their normal health. Sometimes, though, they can go a bit tad overboard. Lily, Lincoln spoke with a frown. Oh, those good-for-nothing girls. If I wasn't outnumbered 4-1, I'd shove a gas grenade far up there. Lily! Lincoln spoke louder with a slight irritation. The blonde recoiled a bit back at the yell, backing up a little, realizing she irritated him. Sorry, she gazed at the floor. Lincoln stayed silent. He didn't mean to yell, but he needed Lily to calm down. Come here. He reached his good arm out as best he could. Lily walked up to the boy and hugged him, making sure to avoid his sensitive areas. The both released each other after a moment. What happened after I passed out? Well, Lily's cheeks became a faint red. I started to panic because I thought you died, but then Clyde showed up and I told him what happened. So he led us here, and I had been waiting for you to wake up since last night. The girl gave a small yawn. I really didn't sleep much. To be fair, Lincoln did die for a few minutes, but Lily didn't need to know that. Wait, Clyde? Where is he? Lily shrugged. He said he'd be right back, but that was 3 months ago. Well, hours ago. The loud suddenly heard a set of footsteps, and just from the door, Lincoln in no condition to fight. Lily was the only person that stood between them and anyone else who intended to do harm to him. He was about to let someone like her brother, like her sisters nearly did. The blonde went for the launcher, aimed for the door. 10 seconds passed before the tumbler of the knob turned and the door was pushed open. Lily's finger poised on the trigger as if it were a hostile. Fortunately, it was a friend. His one-eyed Jack costume on, Clyde pushed open the door fully open. Hey Lily, I'm back, and Clyde started, and he took out a small bag, noticing upon Lincoln. Oh hey buddy, glad you can make it back to us. You were passed out near the entire day. How do you feel? Like I got my butt kicked by 9 girls. Lincoln shifted in bed as he tried to sit up. How did you find us? Lily looked at her brother and noticed the way he was straining his neck and looked at Clyde. Hold on. She reached under the frame and grabbed the switch and wired to the bed, and then half moved back up, greatly helping Lincoln's field of view. Huh? I didn't know that was that kind of bad. Well, I didn't know how you two built a secret man cave, Lily replied, but putting her launcher on the floor. Anyway, Clyde got their attention. Your car dropped, and so I figured you might have been in trouble. I was heading to the shipyard when I saw you guys in an alley. You looked about ready to kneel over. So when I came down, right as you passed out, at first I didn't believe what Lily told me for a minute, but then she threatened to gas me. And then again, why would you be something like this I'd lie about? The 7-year-old asked heatedly. Well, sorry, it's not every day that your longtime friend suddenly turns on you, you know, the nerdy kid retorted. So, what's in your bag? Lincoln asked. It's just something I had to pick up. Clyde then bent down and fished through it, taking out a syringe with a strange red-colored liquid in it. I snuck into your base, well, former base technically, and managed to nab a few things. It wasn't easy getting in, because I think your sisters changed the security codes. Anyway, I went into the card counter's lab since I remember saying that she was working on some healing medicine that would get rid of that serious injuries within seconds. So I poked around and found this. He shook the syringe in his hands. Lincoln didn't look as if convinced. Are you sure you grabbed the right one? Because I know that CC has a lot of stuff in her lab. Yeah, how do we know it's not poison? Lily asked, scanning Clyde for like a little hawk. Clyde then looked at the syringe. Well, she at least remembered to label it. Lily walked over to Clyde, snatched it from him, rotating it in her head. She spotted the label that the older boy mentioned. Instead of the childish whiffering she might have expected, the label almost looked like printed straight from the computer. The 7-year-old squeezed a little out of the tube to her digit, bringing her mouth for a taste test. The blonde cringed almost immediately, and her tongue sticking out in disgust. Yuck! It tastes better! Well, it's supposed to go in someone's arm, not their mouth, Clyde stated in a deadpan tone. Lily started to wipe her tongue with her finger. How do we know if it works? Card counter probably hasn't tested yet. The African American folded his arms, his brows furrowing in irritation. It was hard enough getting that without getting caught, so I'm definitely not going back to ask her. His look softened a bit. Not only that, I heard bits and pieces of your sisters talking. They weren't too happy with how you guys got away and had a few calling you a traitor, Lily. The 7-year-old's gaze darkened a bit as she stared at the floor. As far as I'm concerned, she tossed the syringe back to Clyde, the only family I have now is Lincoln. She then brushed past Clyde and out the door, which appeared to have led into a hallway. Clyde then blinked at this astonishment. Okay? He then slowly turned to Lincoln. Pardon me for asking, but why is Lily so not Lily? I've never seen her this angry before. The boy walked over to right to Lincoln's side, putting a latex glove on. She just witnessed her sisters attack me, Clyde, Lincoln replied, looking at the open door. I don't blame her, no. If I was in my position, I'd be the same as her, if not worse. I can understand that. Clyde flicked the needle, small amount of mysterious liquid flying out. Sadly, I don't have any siblings, so I'll never know that feeling. Clyde, the white-haired child, put his hand on his friend's shoulder. You're like a brother I've always wanted, and far as I know, you're pretty much a family. He then smiled warmly. Clyde then smiled back. Thanks, bro. He then prepped the syringe in his fingers. Are you sure you want to take this? Because I don't want to be the one who accidentally poisons you or something. Lincoln then bit his lip. Only one way to find out. Both boys crossed their fingers as Clyde injected Lincoln with the fluid. At first, Lincoln didn't feel much, aside from the shooting right up to his arm. Then he felt a wave of warmth suddenly washed over his body like he was chilling outside of a spring day with a cold breeze hitting his face. Some popping sounds were heard as Lincoln felt his bones correcting themselves, most notably his left arm and chest. Clyde then bit his lower lip, thinking Lincoln might explode. However, upon seeing that Lincoln could move his arm a bit without any pain, he let out a breath. He didn't even know what he was holding. Lincoln then sat up on his own, took his arm cast off. Both boys were surprised that his arm looked as good as new. Upon removing the bandages on his chest, no bruising or evidence of injury. They were notable. So, how do you feel? Clyde asked, sweat dripping down his forehead. My arm feels a little sore, but other than that, I feel good as new. Lincoln smiled, removing the blood connector from his side. You sure? You don't feel like you're growing an extra limb or anything weird? Jack persisted. Lincoln sat silently for a moment. He then swung his legs out a bit, waiting for something to happen. Nope. Nothing. Guess DC finally made something without any side effects. Phew. Clyde then wiped his forehead. So what do we do now? It's not like you can't just go back home. I'm fairly certain the girls would force me to reveal where you guys are. Lincoln gave a heavy sigh. Honestly, Clyde, I don't know. I am still trying to get over the whole betrayal myself. It made me think that... He paused, rubbing his left arm. Maybe the girls were right. They managed to do something that was taking me weeks to do, and they beat me to the punch. Literally, I am a terrible leader.